If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. Years ago, when I was still a teenager, my friend Justin and I would often go on long boarding at nights. As my friends and I are night owls, we loved the freedom of almost never seeing another soul on the roads, and our paths were frequented. Even when using main roads, it'd be very rare you'd see a car out so late in such a rural area. And you could see and hear them coming from very far away due to the headlights and the noise of the vehicle disrupting the peaceful silence of night. We were really into it at the time, and would often ride our boards for miles and miles, sometimes not arriving home until the sun's come up. One night in particular, we decided to ride a few miles away from our usual back roads to take one of our favourite hidden routes. It began with a narrow path that only had a piece of land separating two sides of a lake. I would often sink under due to rain, and wanted to seize the opportunity to use it before it rained and went underwater again. It was roughly 2 miles long. It was extremely relaxing to ride through due to the scenery. After making it to the end of the lake, we decided to continue moving and turn into a very close path that leads directly to a densely wooded wilderness reservation. As we come up to the first hill, we look down to the bottom into the blackness, and we noticed what appeared to be a tiny, moving ball of dim light down there. It seemed so strange. It was extremely difficult to make out what it was. Rather than shine our flashlights, we curiously watched it for a few moments, whispering to each other about what it could be. All at once, the small light turned into multiple blinding lights and extremely loud revving sounds, overwhelming our senses that had become accustomed to dark and silence. Acting purely on fear, we instantly turned around, running as fast as we could, hearing yelling and revving gaining behind us. We managed to run off the path into the very dark, overgrown hole in the side of a hill in the forest. We decided to hide in the natural dugout of this hill, hoping the plants and darkness were going to be enough to protect us from whatever was happening. We watched our pursuers ride up to where we had originally been standing. Turns out, there were 4 men on 2 4-wheelers and 2 full-size motorcycles. They're yelling at each other about something, but we couldn't make out what they were saying due to the distance we had covered. We felt safe enough to whisper very softly to each other, speculated who these people could be. Our first thought was that they might be rangers of some kind, although we had never seen any out there, and many times we had been there. Honestly, we doubted that this country had the budget or desire to have anyone to patrol the woods deep at night. Besides that, these men are on vehicles entirely appropriate for only paved tracks. They are very angry about something. They called out to us for a while, yelling, "We know you're out there. Come on out, now." We stayed silent and decided to call their bluff instead of running. Eventually, we clearly heard one of the men yell, "Find them now," smashing a bottle. This has erased any hope that these were park rangers. We watch as they split up, each of them going a different way on separate paths on their vehicles, including the path that we've come from. It took us what felt like ages to even move. We were frozen in fear and terror, watching the lights from the vehicles travel throughout the woods and paths. One of them already come in full circle and passing the point he started from. I think about calling out for help, but I'm too afraid to open my phone in fear that even the smallest amount of light is going to give away our location. After waiting for the lights of the vehicle to reach their furthest distance yet, we finally summoned the nerve to get up and try and run somewhere far enough away to make it to safety. We then run as fast as we can through the woods. Since their headlights gave away their location on these paths, we would hide again whenever we felt like they're getting close. Our available hiding spots were getting progressively worse as the woods become less dense. The fear I felt waiting for one of them to pass us is basically terror that's been unmatched to this day. Finally, we emerged from our woods onto the intersection of the two main roads, far away from where we actually started. We ducked into the ditch to call for help. When I opened my phone, I noticed I have recent missed calls from one of our other friends, Connor, who we're supposed to meet up with after our longboard excursion. I call him frantically asking where he was. I'm sure he's got taken. But luck was with us again. He hadn't given up on our plans despite us ignoring him, only a few miles away in the opposite direction. I gave him the names of the two streets we're on near the corner and explained that we needed picking up right away. He agreed to speed over to us while Justin and I wait in hiding. Thankfully, Connor arrived before the men do. Relief doesn't begin to describe how I felt being safely driven home. After explaining everything that happened to Connor, we ended up moving on with our nights and decided not to call the police. We figured they would be gone by the time any officer made it out there, especially being in such thick woods, and that we'd only be putting ourselves at risk by admitting to breaking the law taking those paths so late. I still have no idea what happened or who those people were. I've been told all kinds of theories from friends and family that have heard the story. Some think it is a huge drug deal. Justin and I later admitted to each other that when the revving started we couldn't see anything and both started panicking thinking they're chainsaws. It could have been so much worse. Frustratingly enough, whatever those men thought we saw, we actually didn't. And had they have known that, they may have never chased us in the first place. It's been a long time for me, but I used to go camping a lot by myself. When I got older, I got used to going on sailing trips alone, loading up the boat, leaving a float plan with someone and disappear for a week or so. In both cases, the scariest stuff to me usually happened with unexplained noises followed by my imagination. Anyway, I was chilling on a log when suddenly a pine cone falls on the ground next to me. Then one hits me. At first I was sure someone was throwing them at me, but no one was around. I listened, I smelt, I looked, but nothing was out of place. Another pine cone hit the ground even closer to me, and I began to freak out. I don't believe in things like Bigfoot, but my imagination began to take over, and I wondered if something was out there throwing them at me. I grabbed my pack and began to walk away. Another few pine cones hit the ground around me, and I got this weird chill running up my spine. I was really freaked out and hightailed it out of there. I don't know what, if anything, was throwing them at me, but it scares the life out of me. The second thing I had was after a long day of sailing, I anchored up in a protected buoy for the night. Usually this is a pretty popular spot for overnight staying, but on this night I was the only boat there. The forecast called for a line of storms to come through, so I made my dinner early, double checked my anchor and went to bed. Several hours later, I'm awoken by a very loud and very eerie, weird wailing sound. The sound wasn't human, and I've never heard an animal make the sound before. It varied a little in pitch and intensity, but it sounded as though it was coming from all sides of the boat. I'm scared out of my mind. I didn't move, pretended I was asleep just in case there was something out there waiting to get to me. I listened to that sound for a good 10 minutes trying to localize it, racking my brain for what it could be. Coyotes, dolphins, aliens maybe. I have no clue, but it was not a natural sound. It was scary and dark. And this was going on while lightning flashes in the distance, followed by the loud sound of thunder rolling. I decided I had to go topside to check it out before the storm hit. And if I was gonna die, I'd die fighting, not curled up in my bunk. So I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on my shorts and headed to the companionway. When I turned the lights on, I could swear the noise got louder and rose in pitch. Freaky. I carry on, rushing through the hatch and shining my lights all around trying to find the source. And nothing. I fired up my spotlight, shining it all around the boat looking for the source of the sound, which had seemingly died down since I entered the cockpit. But all the million candle power revealed was a brown pelican. He was scared away when I shone the light on him. I gathered up my courage as the raindrops began to fall and went on deck where I still can't find the source of the noise. I end up going back in because the storm comes, and to this day I have no idea what it was. Now this was about 20 years ago, and wasn't really in seclusion, but nonetheless is pretty disturbing. When my dad was young, he would sleep over at his cousin's house during the weekends. The house was all on one floor, consisting of the front door entrance attached to the living room and the kitchen. The living room had a long hallway for the bathroom, his aunt and uncle's room, and the bedroom where him and all his cousins would sleep. His cousin's room was pretty small with only one bed, a dresser and closet. The bed was pressed against the window, so when they slept, they would face the closet and the doorway. One night at around 3 AM, my dad recalls seeing shadows coming from the closet. Panics a bit, then trying to wake up his cousins without any success. He doesn't see anything else or hear anything, so he falls back asleep. The next night, my dad hears a noise coming from outside the window behind the bed. He wakes up his cousin, and they try to run to where his aunt and uncle are sleeping, with nothing else happening for the remainder of the night. A couple of weeks later, my dad stays over for another sleepover. This is where it gets weird. At some point late in the night, at around 1 AM, my dad hears something coming from the closet and sees shadows moving. Something must have freaked him out because he starts screaming, and suddenly a man sprints out of the closet, down the hallway and out of the door. His cousin wakes up, his aunt and uncle. The cops come and do some investigating, but never discover anything. We figure that this guy has been living here for a while. We have no idea how long. It just gives me creeps knowing what could have happened if it was just me and my younger siblings in there alone. I love caving. I mean, absolutely love it. I even enjoy going through caving clubs. They send you information about once a month about featured cave tours. So one month, they sent out a packet containing a 7 to 8 hour Wildman Cave tour. I've been out on Wildman tours before. They're not too difficult. Maybe some rappelling or mild climbing. Nothing over an hour though. This one had real danger. Climbing too much to the right, you get stuck. Slip too far, you can fall in a hole. Getting rescued there is virtually impossible. So there's 5 of us. 3 tour guides, me and another person. About halfway through the cave, they let us rest off this shallow ledge. It's right next to the biggest drop off in the cave. The guide told us with larger groups, they did the typical total darkness and have everyone turn off their headlamps just to look around. When he mentioned us to follow suit, we did. After about 30 seconds, there was this sound. It honestly sounded like footsteps, and then falling rocks, followed by a screech. Immediately, the guide puts his headlamp on and starts panicking. I think he thought one of us had fallen or jumped off the cliff. He turns to the other guide and says, did they hear it? No one can explain it. They hadn't moved and 2 of us are still there. He radioed the surface to ask if any of the other tours were missing anyone. This was about 3 hours away from the start of the Wildman path, and without our headlamps, it's literally staring into a wall of the abyss. There was no way an experienced or inexperienced caver could have got that far. No animals lived this deep in the cave. The guide then asks us if we want to continue, and would understand if we refused, and we decided not to. We eventually completed the tour and everything was normal, but I have no idea what that could have possibly been to this day. I was once exploring the same woods near where I live. It was a while back when it goes from daylight to blackness in about half an hour, so it's pretty dark and I get lost out there. Anyway, I'm trying to find my way back and I noticed this wooden-like hut. It seemed pretty quiet, so I thought I'd check it out. When I arrive, I see the remnants of a fire. There was tarpaulin sheets with dry blood around it, and I mean blood everywhere. I tried taking a few photos, but my camera couldn't function well in the dark. I suddenly start hearing sounds around me, realizing now something might be close. I'm sure a murderer's coming, or some crazy guy. I'm sure they put out the fire as I arrived too. I very swiftly left. On the outside of the hut I see a symbol drawn in blood. It's literally the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I never went back to them woods again. I was hiking in a remote, empty canyon by myself with only my dog for company. A couple of hours into the hike, I started feeling really paranoid. I can't figure out why, but I felt like someone's watching me, and my dog begins acting weird too. He was hanging really close to me while usually he roams far. His hackles would go up randomly, occasionally running towards the wall of the canyon to stand up on his legs and sniff intensely. 2 or 3 times he'd give me a random little growl, very uncommon. As we're leaving the canyon, I heard a little rock fall up on the wall, and I look up to see multiple mountain lions staring at us. Now, I am pretty sure they've been stalking us for a while. We slowly make our way out of the canyon very cautiously. The second I leave it, the feeling vanished. I was so thankful for my dog being on guard that day, because if he wasn't, I probably would have lost my life. I used to work as a lifeguard for a scouting camp situated on a huge lake, deeper in a pine forest. The kids would spend a week earning merit badges and swimming in the lake and getting splinters and going home, only for the next batch to come out and do exactly the same thing. This meant staff like me would spend a month or 2 living at the camp in tents. The staff campgrounds are a solid 10-minute walk from the showers, so if you wanted to be clean, you had to walk the whole darn way back along this gravel road. So we usually went in groups, but occasionally you go alone. So I'm walking down one night with my towel and sundries, and I look through the pine trees to see a bright light. Cool, I thought. This must be a planet like Venus or Jupiter. I reach the showers, and as I'm showering, I look up at this light. As I study it, I realise it's way too bright to be a star or a planet. It's almost like a helicopter with a floodlight about 5 miles away, around 30 degrees off from being directly overhead. The thing is, there's no noise, and the light isn't moving. It's just there. I stare at it for a good 5 minutes trying to figure out what the heck it is, when suddenly it turns over and zips off. From the distance, I stare at it. I realise there's no way it could be a helicopter or plane because of how quickly it moved. To this day I have no idea what the hell that thing was. I was at a lake in the woods, fishing with my 4-year-old kid and wife. There was no one there except us. The lake was surrounded by a dense forest of trees, brush, and the like. We're about 50 yards from our vehicle down a hill at the bank with our poles resting in the water. The fishing line was very slow, so I decided to test my new camera. So I walk around the general area while my wife sat with our child tending the fishing poles. I walked up to a hill from the bank and through the trees to the mouth of a clearing where all of a sudden I see 4 guys approximately 20 yards away just out there in the woods. Now they're kind of weird. They look like a cross between grunge band members, Deep Woods Hillbillies. I don't know, they were dirty, having unwashed clothes looking raggedy, and they just stood there for what seemed like an eternity, looking at me. The look in one of their eyes is either desperation or malicious intent. I play it off and just focus my camera in another direction. Then I noticed that one of them had somehow managed to move closer to where I was, immediately making me feel uneasy. I mean, why in the hell were these guys out there so far in the middle of nowhere? No fishing poles, hiking gear or anything. The one that had moved closer to where I was said out of the blue, "Hey, won't you come and take our picture?" Then kind of half giggled, revealing rotten looking teeth. He had as much teeth as a jack-o'-lantern. Not to judge this guy, he just looked very sketchy. I could definitely feel his intentions were not good. I kind of smiled back nervously and just kind of nodded and started making my way back to my family and the fishing spot. As I walk away, I heard one of them in the distance shout, "Hey man, come over here. Take our picture now." And then I heard others laughing, and I noticed they're slowly making their way towards my direction. They start giggling and laughing amongst themselves in a sinister way. I can't make out much of what they're saying, but I can hear a few odd comments like, "Yeah, he's alone," and "Nah, something's over there near his car." Anyway, I finally made it down the bank and immediately told my wife to quickly start gathering our stuff and head back to the car. She could tell by the sound of my voice and demeanour that something was wrong. We both half-heartedly packed up, grabbing our kid, heading up the bank and hill to where our vehicle's at. Still, the only other people out there, right as I get towards my car, I notice that they're in the distance coming out of the woods towards us. We then throw our stuff in the back, jump in the car and start heading out. I didn't want to worry my wife, but had the realization that there was only one way we could get out there, through an old dirt road that meandered through the woods and past near where they're at. I'm afraid that we're gonna get cut off, so I floor it and know nothing's gonna stop me. As we're making our way out, I'd seen nothing to the right of my peripheral vision, yet it was just one of them in full stride swinging towards us, running. This time I noticed he had something in his right hand that looks like a tire iron or something. We lost him in the woods just about as we made it out onto the road. A while later, maybe 30 minutes or so into the ride, we made the old country concrete highway that led back to the city. At this point, we've seen another vehicle in the distance coming towards us, and it's an old beat up truck. I thought, oh god, they've caught us. But I realised that they're lumberjacks. They say, "Is everything okay?" and "Are we lost?" I said no, we know how to get back. I told them about what happened and he didn't even seem fazed. Just said we shouldn't be out there alone. I hate the fact that he didn't take this serious and said he never comes out here without his rifle and his arm knife, and that there's weird people out here that do a lot of wrong. I said like what, and he never elaborated. I hate the fact that this ever happened to me. It changed my outlook on camping. I was hiking in the Appalachian Trail northbound in early August a few years ago, and I was a day out of Devonport Gap heading to Hot Springs, NC. I don't remember the exact shelter I was at, but I know I was somewhere north of Max Patch. That time of year, there aren't many people on the trail, and other than a couple of cars at Max Patch, I hadn't seen or spoke to another person in a full day. I decided to end my hike for the day at about 7 PM so I could eat dinner and prepare for bed before dark. Now I was also feeling a little dreary from the hike. So I ate, filmed, reloaded my water, hit the hay as it gets dark. At about 2:30 AM, I was startled awake, but not by a noise, rather the absolute silence around me. I didn't hear the toads, crickets, owls that you'd normally expect to hear, but I'd also heard when I went to bed 6 hours earlier. I look around, but saw nothing. Everything was perfectly still. I made the decision that I had to get out of there. I packed all my gear in about 5 minutes, threw on my headlamp, grabbed my bear bag, and noped my way up the trail at around 4 miles per hour in the pitch black until sunrise. I finished my planned 18 miles into the hot springs by 10 AM. To this day I have no idea what there was that morning. I know something was there though. I've encountered tons of predators in the woods, from black bears to coyotes, but to this day I have never experienced anything like that before. I'm sure it was a person or a huge predator. Whatever took over that day was primitive, and I'm glad I got out of there. Now, camping in general can be freaky, not so much during day, but when it gets dark, it gets really dark. Whenever people say the Blair Witch Project wasn't scary, I always ask them if they've ever been out camping. Now, laying in your tent at night, not knowing what's 3 feet away from you, is terrifying. It's pitch black and deadly quiet. Like being alone in a creaky old house except with a 10 times multiplier. Every second or so you hear a bear or wolf. Or even maybe a person that's also tenting that you don't know about. Now, probably my freakiest experience happened when I was a kid camping in Colorado. It was dark but still too early for us to be tired, so we're sitting around the fire doing normal things, eating and talking. I would say we're telling scary stories, but screw that. We're probably talking about Disney or something. Now keep in mind how dark it is out there. The light from the fire only goes so far to create what feels like a wall where all light stops. As we're sitting there, all of a sudden, my sister and I look up and see a pair of eyes staring at us. Me and my sister both looked at each other at the same time before freaking out. We're on the edge of losing our minds. Our parents calm us down, telling us not to move. We have no idea what it was or how big it was, being impossible to judge in the darkness. My mum and dad immediately got us back in the car and we sped out of there. To this day I still have no idea what the hell that thing was. What freaked me out more was my dad's reaction. He's an avid hunter and has lots of experience, and I've never seen him scared like that before. I went turkey hunting with my dad in the Shawnee National Forest several years ago. I was around 10. I took one afternoon to hike and scout hunting spots. Along the trail we saw a few blood splatters and drips. Not a big deal though, it's nature. About 1/4 of a mile up the trail, however, we come up to 3 dogs hanging from a tree, skinned and everything. We go a bit further and there's a bluff not too far up the way. Come to the bluff and we find weird symbols burned into the ground on the sides of the rock wall. Candle wax everywhere and more blood. By the time my dad, whom I've never seen scared before, looked at me, he said, "Let's go," and we took out of the camp immediately. The worst part is that we weren't able to leave that campsite at night, so we had to lay awake in the camper in case anything happened. My buddies and I were camping in the woods of Yosemite, California. We're the only ones in the area, and we know this because of the camping registry. We're quite literally the only ones in a 20-mile radius. Anyway, everything's normal and great, and our campsite was on the side of a lake. At night, we shared a small 8-man tent. It was cozy with 8 guys in a tent, but not horrible. At about 3 in the night, we're suddenly awoken by one member of our group standing up in the tent, frantically opening the door. He poked his head out and began super frantically and nervously saying, "There's someone in our camp." He kept repeating it. It sounded terrifying. Needless to say, we're horrified that someone might be in our camp, because we know we're the only ones supposed to be there alone. Everyone had been woken up and is now looking at each other with a mortified look on our faces. After about 15 seconds of saying that someone's in our camp, he lays back down like nothing's happened and slept. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I don't know what caused it. It's almost as though he's possessed.